Good morning. It's good to be back at All Souls. Today I would like to talk about not knowing. So much of our dominant culture tells us to cultivate knowledge, facts, expertise, and certainty. Uncertainty is often viewed as a weakness or a temporary state on the way to knowing. What do you want to be when you grow up? What will you major in? What will you do with your degree? And I don't know is more often than not met with awkwardness or reassurances. Well, that's okay. I'm sure you'll figure it out. True, most of us will need to secure a livelihood, and college students must select a major. But what happens when we linger in not knowing? In Zen Buddhism, there is an expression, not knowing is most intimate. It comes from an encounter between the 9th century Zen master Dizhang and his student Fayan. Dizhang asks Fayan, "Where are you going?" Fayan says, "Around on pilgrimage." Dizhang replies, "What is the purpose of your pilgrimage?" "I don't know," says Fayan. "Not knowing is most intimate," the teacher responds. What kind of not knowing is this? Is Fayan lost, topographically or existentially? Or is he in touch with his present, moment-to-moment experience, not making assumptions in advance, not moving forward within his own predetermined reference system? This summer, I've been teaching 2- and 3-year-olds in a nature-immersion school in Prospect Park. They ask many questions, as 2- and 3-year-olds do. Teachers at our school are encouraged not to respond with factual answers. "What's that?" "A sewage cap." But rather, to match and encourage the child's sense of wonder and curiosity, to join them. I wonder, what is that? What do you think it is? What do you notice about it? Can we lift it? What sound does it make when we tap it with a stick? As we heard in today's reading, we must sully the plain snow with footprints in order to get anywhere. But can we take our time in getting there? And sometimes live in the nowhere? In this age of the smartphone, when the answer to any point of inquiry is always at our fingertips, our capacity to wonder is perhaps diminishing. Maybe a decade ago, when smartphones were still somewhat novel, and someone would pose a question and immediately whip out their phone to look up the answer, my mother and I would look at each other and ask facetiously, "Why wonder anything anymore?" With the World Wide Web in our hands, we short-circuit the part of our brain that puzzles over the things we don't know, that imagines, that wonders. In his book, Deep Adaptation, Navigating the Realities of Climate Chaos, Jem Bendell lays out what he calls escape ideology, the ideology that he perceives as being behind the destruction and suffering that dominant societies have caused and are causing. Escape is an acronym, and the S stands for surety, a synonym for certainty. Surety describes what Bendell writes is the threefold assumption that we can be certain of reality, that it is good to be certain of reality, and that there is a universal standard through which we can all agree what is reality and how to know it. Bendel traces this threefold assumption to the scientific revolution and the rise of rationalism, which privilege and empower certain individuals, namely those who are educated and with gender, race, and class privilege. To speak in more Buddhist terms, the felt need for surety that now seems to pervade our dominant cultures comes from our grasping for stability and our aversion to indeterminacy. Most of us do not like the feeling of groundlessness. It's a difficult place to stay when our habituated response is flailing for a landing place, something familiar, known. So out of fear, people cling to their worldviews and deny the possibilities of others' truths and experiences. We cut ourselves off from people who are different from us. We shut down our compassion and empathy. But what happens when we stay with uncertainty? The poet John Keats writes of negative capability, which he describes as the capacity for being in uncertainties, mysteries, doubts, without any irritable reaching after fact and reason. Perhaps this has to do with what Master Dijang calls most intimate. Being with things as they are, rather than as we assume them to be. Bendel points out that the existence of things is infinitely more complex than words and concepts can capture or convey. The tree outside your home, the neighbor who plays their music too loud, your child, your partner. Do you know them? What kind of knowing is it? As we live into our ecological emergency, many of us seek refuge from uncertainty in one camp or another. Techno-optimism, or faith that our technology will save us. Denial that there really is a problem, or that it's happening here, now, or that it's really that bad. Or the conviction that all is doomed. Human civilization, and possibly humanity as a species, is over. While there may be compelling research into any of these resting places, as the Tibetan Buddhist teacher Adam Lobel reminds us, we just don't know exactly what's going to happen, when, where, and how. We don't know the future, and that can be a very difficult place to find ourselves. Still, if we can forbear the anxiety or grief or rage or terror, we may be able to touch the intimacy of the now, which is open, undetermined, alive. Like Bendel, the early 20th century philosopher Edmund Husserl connected modern science's claim to and promotion of objectivity with emerging crisis in Western civilization. Husserl theorized the life world, or Lebenswelt, the world of our directly lived experience, our immediate present prior to any conceptualization about it. The life world is always ambiguous or indeterminate, as it arises in relation to our position within it. Yet it is intersubjective, a common field. As an example, Husserl takes our phenomenological experience of the earth. Although, as most of us learned in elementary school, science tells us that the earth rotates on its axis and moves through space as it revolves around the sun, we do not know this from our direct experience. Rather, Husserl argues, the earth gives us the very concept of space, of motion, and of rest. So ubiquitous it appears to our eyes, and so solid it feels to our feet. The earth, at absolute rest, is that by which we measure our own movements. In his notes, Husserl scrawled, "Overthrow of the Copernican theory. The original arc, Earth, does not move." I'm not advocating the repression of science or a return to the Dark Ages, but rather am pointing to a different kind of knowing, one that is intimate, prior to conceptual thought, felt in our sensual bodies, and known to us as the deeply relational beings that we are. How do we actually know the earth, know each other, when we shed our textbooks and measuring instruments and feel intimately, when we don't already know? The author of the 14th century mystical Christian work, The Cloud of Unknowing, instructs that to access God, one must enter a cloud of unknowing, a darkness that is an absence of knowing. One must also place a cloud of forgetting beneath oneself, so as to forget one's knowledge of everything that was ever created. For if thoughts of any created thing, even thoughts that seem holy and good, are in one's mind, they are between you and your God, to the extent that anything is in your mind but God alone. But now you ask me, the Cloud author writes, how am I to think of God himself, and what is he? And to this I can only answer, I do not know. For with your question, you have brought me into that very darkness and that very cloud of unknowing that I want you to be in yourself. By grace, it is possible to have full knowledge of all other created things and their works, and indeed of the works of God himself, and to think clearly about them, but of God himself no one can think. And so I wish to give up everything that I can think, and choose as my love the one thing that I cannot think, the Cloud author writes. There's a story of an encounter between a Zen master and a professor who comes to see him to learn Zen. The Zen master, non-in, pours tea for the professor, but once the professor's cup is full, he keeps on pouring. The professor cries out, "It's already full, no more will go in." Non-in replies, "Like this cup, you are already full of your opinions and speculations. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup? How will you know God bereft of a cloud of unknowing? How will you see the newcomer in town, the migrant, the refugee, unless you forget your prejudices, your prejudiciousness? How will you experience this moment with your mind full of thoughts? Where are you going? Someone asks you as you step from your home into the morning air, thermos of coffee in hand and bag over your shoulder. To the train, you answer, as this is your daily routine. What is your purpose of going to the train? The stranger persists. Appreciating their sincere inquiry, you pause and say, I don't know. As you leave them and continue on your way, their question stays with you. What is the purpose of my going to the train? It stays with you as you board the train, and as if by rote, detrain at your habitual stop. As your feet lead you down the street, around the corner, and toward your destination.